Welcome to Passing World, the channel where history comes alive. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more fascinating stories from the past. Today, we explore one of the most important and devastating conflicts in modern history, the American Civil War. A war that decided the future of the United States, ended slavery, and changed the course of world history forever. The story begins long before the first shot was fired. By the mid-1800s, the United States was growing rapidly, but beneath the surface, the nation was deeply divided. The northern states were becoming industrialized, building factories, railroads, and cities. The southern states relied heavily on agriculture, especially cotton plantations worked by millions of enslaved African Americans. For decades, Americans argued over slavery, states' rights, and the future direction of the country. Every time a new territory joined the nation, the same question emerged: would slavery be allowed there? Political compromises delayed conflict but failed to solve the problem. Everything changed in 1860 when Abraham Lincoln was elected President of the United States. Many Southern leaders feared that Lincoln's administration would eventually threaten slavery. One after another, Southern states left the Union. By early 1861, 11 states had formed the Confederate States of America under President Jefferson Davis. The United States was now divided into two rival nations. On April 12, 1861, Confederate forces opened fire on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. The American Civil War had begun. The Union, led by Abraham Lincoln, sought to preserve the United States. The Confederacy fought for independence and the preservation of its Southern way of life. At first glance, the Union seemed far stronger. The North had about 22 million people compared to the South's 9 million. It possessed most of the nation's factories, railroads, and financial resources. The Union Navy could blockade Southern ports and cut off trade. Yet the Confederacy had advantages of its own. Many of its military leaders were highly experienced. Among them was General Robert E. Lee, who would become one of the most respected commanders in military history. In July 1861, the First Battle of Bull Run shattered hopes for a quick war. Confederate forces defeated Union troops near Washington, proving that the conflict would be long and brutal. As the war expanded, new battlefields appeared across the continent. In the West, Union General Ulysses S. Grant emerged as a rising star. His victories at Fort Henry and Fort Donelson opened important routes into Confederate territory. Then came the Battle of Shiloh in April 1862. Over 2 days, more than 23,000 soldiers became casualties. Americans were shocked by the scale of the bloodshed. At sea, technology was changing warfare forever. In March 1862, the ironclad warships USS Monitor and CSS Virginia fought the first battle between armored naval vessels. Wooden warships suddenly became obsolete. Meanwhile, Robert E. Lee took command of Confederate forces in the East and quickly demonstrated his brilliance. Through a series of daring maneuvers, he repeatedly defeated larger Union armies. But the war reached a critical turning point in September 1862 at the Battle of Antietam. More than 22,000 soldiers became casualties in a single day, making it the bloodiest day in American military history. Although the battle was tactically inconclusive, Lee's invasion of the North was halted. President Lincoln used this opportunity to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. On January 1, 1863, Lincoln declared enslaved people in Confederate territory to be forever free. The Civil War was no longer simply a struggle to preserve the Union. It had become a fight against slavery. The proclamation also allowed Black Americans to serve in the Union military. By the end of the war, approximately 180,000 black soldiers had fought for the Union. Their courage and sacrifice played a major role in the North's victory. In May 1863, Lee achieved one of his greatest victories at Chancellorsville, defeating a much larger Union army. But the triumph came at a terrible cost. General Thomas Stonewall Jackson, one of Lee's most trusted commanders, was accidentally shot by his own men and later died. Only weeks later, Lee launched another invasion of the North. This decision led to the most famous battle of the war, Gettysburg. For 3 days, from July 1 to July 3rd, 1863, massive armies clashed in Pennsylvania. The fighting was intense and relentless. The battle reached its climax with Pickett's charge, when thousands of Confederate soldiers marched across open ground toward Union lines. The attack ended in disaster. Lee's army suffered devastating losses and was forced to retreat. Gettysburg is widely regarded as the turning point of the Civil War. At almost the same time, another crucial victory occurred far to the west. General Grant captured Vicksburg after a lengthy siege. The Union now controlled the Mississippi River, splitting the Confederacy in two. From this point forward, Southern hopes of victory steadily declined. Later that year, Abraham Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address. Though only a few minutes long, it became one of the most famous speeches in history. Lincoln described the war as a struggle for freedom, equality, and democratic government. By 1864, Grant had become commander of all Union armies. Unlike previous generals, he refused to retreat after suffering losses. Instead, he continually pressured Lee's forces through a series of brutal campaigns. The casualties were enormous, but the Confederacy could not replace its losses. Meanwhile, another Union commander, William Tecumseh Sherman, launched one of the war's most controversial operations. After capturing Atlanta, Sherman began his famous march to the sea. His army destroyed railroads, bridges, factories, warehouses, and military supplies across Georgia. Sherman believed that breaking the South's ability and will to fight would shorten the war. His strategy helped bring the conflict closer to its end. The Civil War also witnessed remarkable technological innovations. Railroads moved troops and supplies over vast distances. Telegraphs allowed commanders and politicians to communicate almost instantly. Repeating rifles increased firepower. Hot air balloons provided aerial reconnaissance. Submarines appeared for the first time in combat. Medical systems improved as military doctors developed organized ambulance services and field hospitals. Yet disease remained a deadly enemy. In fact, more soldiers died from disease than from battlefield wounds. Life on the home front was equally difficult. Women took on new responsibilities as nurses, workers, and managers of farms and businesses. Figures such as Clara Barton gained national recognition for caring for wounded soldiers. The war also transformed the economy. The federal government introduced the first income tax and expanded its financial system. In the South, inflation became extreme, and shortages of food and medicine grew severe. As the conflict dragged on, civilian suffering increased dramatically. By early 1865, the Confederacy was collapsing. Union forces surrounded Petersburg and Richmond, the Confederate capital. On April 2nd, Richmond fell. 1 week later, on April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. After 4 years of warfare, the Civil War was effectively over. Grant offered generous surrender terms, helping the nation begin the difficult process of healing. But tragedy struck once again. On April 14, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln was shot by John Wilkes Booth while attending a play at Ford's Theater. He died the following morning. The nation mourned the man who had guided it through its greatest crisis. The war had ended, but enormous challenges remained. Approximately 4 million formerly enslaved people were now free. The question became, what would freedom mean in practice? The answer came through a series of constitutional amendments. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery throughout the United States. The 14th Amendment granted citizenship and equal protection under the law. The 15th Amendment protected voting rights regardless of race. Together, these amendments transformed the legal foundation of the nation. However, Reconstruction faced fierce resistance. Many Southern states adopted discriminatory laws, while organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan used violence and intimidation against black citizens. Although important progress was made, many of the promises of Reconstruction remained unfulfilled for generations. The Civil War left a profound legacy. It preserved the United States as a single nation. It ended slavery. It expanded the power of the federal government. It transformed warfare through new technology and military strategy. And it redefined American democracy. The human cost was staggering. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers lost their lives. Entire communities were devastated. Families were torn apart. Yet the conflict shaped the modern United States and influenced struggles for freedom and equality around the world. More than a century and a half later, the American Civil War remains one of history's most important lessons about division, leadership, sacrifice, and human freedom. Thank you for watching Passing World. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, keep exploring the stories that shaped our world.